folks joining in. So we'll be getting started in just a couple minutes here for the Kingston Forward public hearing. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to give a few minutes. We have a few folks I still see joining in. So thank you for joining us. We'll probably get started just a couple minutes past 6:30. We'll give everyone a few minutes to find their meeting link and join us. But this will be the public hearing for the Kingston Forward Draft Code 1.0. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to get starting with just a few reminders before we get started with the meeting. So thank you for joining us. My name is Amy Groves. I'm with Dover Colin Partners. We're a consultant to the city who is working on the Kingston Forward Zoning Update project. You've joined our public hearing to gather feedback on the first draft of the code. I would want to give a reminder to everyone that the meeting tonight is being recorded. So anyone who would like to speak and give a comment, the meeting is recorded and it will be posted to the city's website after tonight. So you can let anyone know who is not able to join us if they would like to watch and hear more about the comments that were shared tonight. It will be posted at the engagekingston.com project website. But I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you have any technical issues during tonight's meeting, you can look for the chat button on your Zoom screen and let us know, and we can try to help you out and see if we can help to resolve the issue. So please use that if you have any problems. Tonight, the agenda for tonight, we're going to do a very, very brief presentation. We did do a longer presentation earlier this month. That is on the Engage Kingston website. So if you're curious after tonight's meeting and you want to learn more about the code, go to engagekingston.com and go to the Kingston Forward page, and you can watch the full presentation from a couple weeks ago of this first draft. But tonight we're going to give just a very quick overview of some of the big ideas behind the code and the schedule. And then most of tonight's meeting will be dedicated to public comments. So, and Bartek will be sharing with you all how that is going to work in just a few minutes. But first, we want to get started talking about the code. You know, this process, we've been working on the Kingston Forward project since the last fall, and we've started having some meetings and events with Charette last November, gathering lots of comments and thoughts on what people would like to see within the new draft of the code, you know, with how they would like to see the code improved. And so from all those meetings and input, we developed this series of big ideas. And so these ideas really form the blueprint for what you see in the draft code. And you can see icons on the screen tonight with each idea. And so if you go back to watch that full presentation from a couple weeks ago, you can kind of see how these ideas have been weaved through the first draft of the code. So I'm going to, kind of quickly go through these ideas. The first is, we heard that there's really a desire to allow smaller incremental development that fits with the community vision, easy to do and encouraged. By improving and simplifying the approvals process. So that's the first big idea. Second, we talked about building to street relationship and really, having new development that fits the context of the surrounding neighborhood. And what we call a consistent building to street relationship that encourages walkability and a continuation of, the great city fabric that you have already in your historic areas of the city. There's a desire to have a wide variety of housing types to improve affordability. This includes accessory dwelling units. So you'll find when you review the draft of the code, new provisions for allowing accessory dwelling units within the city. There's a desire to have new development that supports the community vision for sustainability and resiliency and supporting a green, resilient future. Onto the next slide, there's just a few more of these. There's a desire for new and improved streets to support walkability and bikeability and to include street trees on city streets. Parking, we've heard a lot about parking, and there's a desire to right size the parking, having enough so that you support business activity, but not too much where you're discouraging building reuse or affordability or environmental goals. And then finally, there's a desire to fix some of the trouble spots in the code. So reducing the number of non-conforming lots and clarifying some of the standards to make the code easier to understand. So when you review the draft code, you're going to come across a term called the transect. And so that is the big organizing feature for the draft of the code. And the idea is that we haven't organized the code around land uses the way it is now. Rather than finding a section of the code dealing with residential or commercial buildings, we've actually defined the type of place that you see in the city. So you'll find that, you know, these transects have been defined to fit each of Kingston's unique neighborhoods. So they're numbered T5, T4, T3. You'll find these numbers throughout the code. The higher the number, so T5 is the highest number in the code, that is the most urban and the most intense areas. And so that's, for example, Broadway, Main Street, and you know, your neighborhoods that have buildings that are closest to the street and buildings that are closest together. As you go down in numbers, buildings start to become a little bit more detached, will set back a little further from the street. You can see some of the images here for T4 and T3. T3 is, you know, primarily, you know, neighborhoods where you see larger front yards and detached homes. And then going all the way down through T2 conservation areas and T1 natural areas. There's also a few areas that we call special districts, and those are areas, for example, institutional uses or large commercial complexes that just really don't fit within any one of those standards. And so we call this a special district, and they have their own rules. So each of these transect zones, when you read the code, they have their a set of rules for how new infill buildings in those zones can be built to complement and be fitting with the buildings around them, how close buildings are to the street and the sidewalk, how tall they are, and where parking is located. And so this is all described in Article 3 of the code. Then, of course, important is the transect map. So this is where all those zones I was just describing are mapped. You can see, again, those purple areas, T5 are the most intense areas. Then the blues are the T4s. The T3 neighborhood areas are the orange, and then the shades of green are the lower transects, the larger lot areas, conservation areas, and the T1 natural areas. So this map is up on the Engage Kingston website, so you can go there and zoom in and study all of the details. The last thing I want to cover is just to walk through the table of contents. So if as you open the code, you can understand and you navigate through and find the things that are of interest to you. So the code is divided into a series of articles. So Article 1 provides an overview of the purpose of the code and defines key terms. It has a section called How to Use the Form-Based Code that describes where you would go to look if you were a property owner and wanting to do new development and how you find information. Article 2 provides the regulating maps, what I just had up on the screen, that applies the transect zones and any site-specific requirements to parcels. Article 3, the transect standards, describes the standards for each of the transect zones. Article 4 is a series of general standards that apply to multiple zones. So, for example, provisions for affordable housing or parking, signage, and the overlay for the waterfront area. Those are all described in Article 4. Article 5 provides guidance for new or redesigned streets. Article 6, the requirements for public open space. Article 7 is a section that can be used for sites that are 2 acres or larger, that you can create a new walkable neighborhood or conservation village. So we call these the large site standards. And then finally, Article 8 describes code administration, which includes a streamlined process for smaller and incremental projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bartek for a recap of where we are in the process and how tonight's public hearing is going to work.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. My name is Bartek Stardai. I'm the City of Kingston's Director of Housing Initiatives. I just want to go through a few more slides before we get to the public hearing. So first, this event is part of a series of input events tied to the first release of the release of the first draft code, which occurred in mid-May. And Amy, you can advance. The process of writing a new form-based code began in 2021 with analysis and visioning, and we are now in the community feedback stage for draft 1.0. I do want to state that there will be 2 more drafts after this one, and there will be an input period for each of those drafts. Once we have a final draft, that's what we'll use for the environmental review process as part of the adoption of the zoning code. The final draft also has to be referred to various agencies and bodies before it can actually be presented to the Common Council, and that will be late of 2022. And you can advance, Amy. And just wanted to mention, engagekingston.com/Kingston Forward is the information hub for this project. It's where you'll find the zoning code and other supplementary materials, including a recording of the citywide meeting from June 8th that goes into a deep dive of what's in the code and how to read the code as well. In addition to this public comment hearing tonight and the other events this month tied to this first draft, you do have the option to submit written public comments, and you can do that by July 1st. So we can make sure to consider that as we prepare the second draft. And you can advance, Amy. Great. In terms of the comments for tonight, I just wanted to clarify, we will not be responding to that comment tonight. However, you will have responses to your comment when we release the second draft of the code, and that will be in early August. I do have, as of now, 15 registered speakers for tonight's hearing. Those speakers will go first. I will unmute you when I call your name, and then you can speak. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and I will let you know when that time is up. If you are not registered to speak, meaning you did not contact me before tonight's hearing, you can raise your hand at any time using the raise your hand button that you'll find on the bottom of your screen, and you'll be added to the list to speak. Again, if you, given that the constraints of timing tonight, if you didn't have time to provide everything that you wanted to say, you can provide written comment. Just make sure to submit that to me by July 1st. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first public speaker, which is Rebecca. And Rebecca, you are unmuted, so you can please go ahead.
Great. It's a little strange not to be able to, oh, here I am. Are you going to turn my camera on, or am I going to be like this?
I don't, just like this, Rebecca.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
I just wanted to know. Thank you for letting me speak. I think the plan is very exciting. I would say I live in the Rondout. I moved here in just about a year ago, not from Brooklyn, actually, but from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to be closer to my family. And in full disclosure, I do have a business that is committed to supporting incremental development around the country. So I'm not hard to find. If you want to talk more about that, let me know. I think the plan as presented is extremely good, actually. It provides for the preservation of historical nature of Kingston, as well as supporting the potential for economic growth and better supporting neighborhoods overall. So I think it's super smart, and it certainly stands within best practice of incremental development as it's being, used around the country and around the world. I do think the question is always, how do we keep all the people here? how do we keep the new people and the old people here? And it seems to me that this code is, because of what it is, it primarily addresses new construction. So I just want to put a pin in how do we preserve or create rent stabilization or other ways to preserve people that are already living here. I am concerned about absentee landlords in the Rondout, which is where I live. And so it seemed to me, in looking at the different transects, that it would be easy to build things here for short-term dwelling where you were not in the neighborhood at all. And I'm concerned in general about absentee landlords all over Kingston and how that affects neighborhoods. So, and I would like to talk, I guess this is really the end of what I have to say. I'm very interested in the accessory or additional dwelling units and how they interface with senior living or with keeping people in their homes. And so I know that there are sometimes incentives or other ways to support the building of those. And I think that would be a great thing to support the income of seniors, but also to make that building process quite simple for people who would like to do that. So whether that's grants or incentives or support from the housing office, just so that people can build those things. So I hope that tax incentives will also be provided for small incremental developers so that they can also have access to capital and support for working through the code. And that's all I have to say, Bartek. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. The next speaker is Renee House. Just give me a second to find you. Okay, Renee, you should be good to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Bartek. I'm Renee House. I'm representing the Kingston Interfaith Council tonight. I want to echo, Rebecca, your concern about absentee landlords, and especially absentee landlords who are using their properties as Airbnbs, very short-term rentals, because that means people who are resident in Kingston can't occupy those spaces. So I just want to lift up and register a shared concern from the council in that regard. I too affirm so much about the code. The Interfaith Council is extremely concerned about affordable housing and therefore grateful for the greater flexibility that we see in the code here for ADUs. We're very grateful about that, and even allowing existing accessory structures that don't meet code to be able to serve as ADUs. There's a lot of flexibility. I have two questions about ADUs. One is 40518B5, which says no mobile homes, travel trailers, etc., includes no manufactured homes. And I'm wondering if that would include a tiny house that is built off-site and then brought to the site as a permanent installment. So that's the first question about ADUs. And I wonder also, is there a limit to the number of ADUs that can situate on a property, provided that they meet all of the requirements for the building code concerning setbacks, etc.? Can there be more than one if you have a very large property? And then in terms of affordable housing, I'm also grateful to see that the code now will include some percentages of affordable housing being set aside in new developments or substantial renovations of existing high-density housing. I wonder if such requirements can also be required of existing high-density developments. Those are my questions and my responses.
Thank you very much, Renee. The next speaker is Victoria Polidoro. Victoria, you should be okay to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Victoria Polidoro here tonight on behalf of William Gottlieb Real Estate, which has been seeking to work collaboratively with the city on updating its zoning law. I did attend the open house on June 10th and had the opportunity to speak with some of the drafters about our concerns. So thank you for putting that together. Just wanted to take the opportunity tonight to put some of the concerns on the record. So the first request is that the T5 Main Street transect extend down Crown and Green Street at least halfway through the block, so that it includes 61 Crown Street and 156, 162 Green Street. With the future infill building opportunities that this form-based zoning will create, we believe that these areas would be natural extensions of the Main Street commercial area. Second, while we like the broad categorization of general commercial uses, we request that film production, film studios, and craft workshops be explicitly included as examples of general commercial uses, so that we don't have an interpretation issue down the road and we can streamline some of the approvals. At least one of the buildings has in the past been used for film production, and we just want to make sure that that use can continue in the future. Third, the requirement for open space should be clarified, especially with respect to projects in the T5 transect, which is intended to be a densely developed area. We're also looking for clarification of how the open space requirements would apply to commercial projects and to adaptive reuse of existing structures. Lastly, we request that the minor site plan review board be limited to professional planning, engineering, and building staff, and not include any elected officials or their confidential secretaries. So thank you for the opportunity to speak again tonight, and we look forward to seeing the next draft.
Thank you. Next speaker is Meisha Tyler. I should be good to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Bertek. I'm actually representing the Amy Zion Church of Kingston, which is located on Franklin Street, and also our pastor, Mary Shelley Bruce, who's not able to be here today. Just a little background, our church has the privilege of being the oldest African-American congregation in Ulster County. We were actually founded, the congregation was in 1848 at what was then Union and Bowery, which is now Franklin Broadway. We moved to 26 Franklin Street in 1863. So we have the privilege of being in the Midtown area for 174 years. Just speaking on Midtown specifically first in this plan, we do see that the T5 transect does include parts of Midtown and specifically the commercial corridor. We're pleased with infill development, which we do believe will help alleviate some of the housing, terrible housing issues that particularly people in Midtown are facing. So we are pleased with that. We also do believe that creating a unified code would help in terms of both residents and potential developers in navigating or putting forth certain projects that might be beneficial, like affordable housing. In terms of recommendations, just the outreach specifically to the Black and Brown community. And I'm just going to speak just very plainly, equity within zoning matters, so voices matter. And so we would like to see more outreach to the historically Black churches, which really are the community hubs of Kingston for our community, and also with the Hispanic community, which is growing. We just feel that it would be better to have as many voices at the table as possible. And sometimes that requires knocking on doors rather than just trying to use technology, maybe to access certain folks who may not, due to the digital divide, be easily accessible in that way. So that's regarding the engagement piece. Just an asterisk, I'm also technically a planner. And looking at this code, I like certain things, again, the infill, but I would say, just personal opinion, that a T5 transect in a floodplain to me, that kind of goes against climate resilience and any sort of basically guidance in terms of building large scale, highly dense projects in places that flood regularly. So looking at the map, I wasn't, I'll say it, too enthralled with all of the development right by, just off the West Strand, or actually East Strand area, because it does flood. And I do kind of believe in climate change. So
just noting you're at 3 minutes.
Right. Okay. And just lastly, special districts should actually extend to also like the library and, hopefully churches and any sort of community spaces, because the mall, or not the mall, but the Kingston Plaza, I understand that's a special district. To me, the library should be too, as well as some of our religious institutions. So just those notes, and also improving engagement and reach out to the Black and Brown community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Terry Smith. Terry, you should be good to go.
Thank you for this opportunity to present, opinion of someone who was raised in the Hudson Harbor area. And Riverview Baptist Church was my church growing up. Its name says really everything about how the Hudson Roundout Delta is entwined with the lives of people there. It's a Black community. It's been there, almost 70 years. A lot of people bought their houses and came to live there because of the view. And it is really transcendently beautiful. I think it is one of the most beautiful views on the Hudson River. Newburgh has a fine view, but this one is also. And I hope that it is not commercialized to the extent that when, frankly, people can't see it anymore. T5 building code would allow the developers to build upwards, but to commercialize it and make it so that only people who, are paying customers or something can see it is, to me, a hostile taking. It's a hostile taking from that Black community in Pankaki, and it's a hostile taking from the people of the city. Right there is an extraordinarily fine view. I recall over my whole life, the celebrations that have been up and down the Strand, and the way the people in the city come together, to see that beauty on holidays and to express their, their unity as a city. And I think to wall it off behind tall buildings pretty much says gentrification, it says commercialization, it says not an appreciation of what the vista there means to the people of the neighborhood, the people of the city, and how it unites them as community. And I would ask you to take that into consideration as you develop, because it's a taking that will affect the quality of life of Kentucky and the people of the city.
Okay, thanks so much. The next speaker is Eileen Katatsky. Eileen, you should be okay to unmute.
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity. My husband and I are property owners and longtime residents of Ward 2. I'll discuss but a few issues here and we'll submit more detailed comments in writing. First, there should have been better outreach to the community. This consequential change is almost invisible to the average homeowner. And I'm suggesting a direct mailing be made to every resident and property owner to better inform the public and increase participation. A particular concern is Kingston's aging infrastructure. With development will come increased demands on our potable water supply, wastewater collection and treatment, stormwater systems, additional workload for the staff. The newly created structures and roofs will significantly add to the stormwater, which presents an issue even now after rain events. Please be reminded of our green initiatives. Would it be possible to create financial incentives to encourage porous and permeable driveways and parking areas? The elimination of a requirement for off-street parking will cause numerous problems. The littering of our residential areas with vehicles of every size and description, the inconvenience of an aging population and those with special needs, the challenges it will present to emergency personnel and Department of Public Works, especially in the winter months, are but a few. We're also concerned about offering bonus stories to developers, but not having the resources to regulate the affordable housing component. As for ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, by definition, these units should be secondary to the primary residence, not equal as in a duplex. ADUs should be built only for long-term rentals to ensure the creation of stable and affordable housing for which it is intended. And how will the owner-occupied requirement be enforced should the property change hands, creating absentee landlords and multiple rental units? The most troubling change would be in our current residential neighborhoods, which would be transformed by duplexes, cottage courts, bed and breakfast establishments, short-term rentals, corner stores, creation of an extra bonus story, and apartment houses with up to 6 units. Can you imagine such a change to your neighborhood? We cannot assume such development to be incremental as stated in the draft code. And a corner store, as described in the code, is not limited to selling coffee, hard rolls, and lottery tickets. It is defined loosely as a commercial or mixed-use space with multiple stories, offices, storage, and dwelling units. In addition, with special permit in the T3 Transect District, you may have automotive-related businesses, eating and drinking establishments, and other unexpected commercial places of business. So please reconsider the many shortcomings of this flawed draft proposal. Complete abandonment of our current zoning regulations may be an overreach for Kingston. And thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Anthony Tampone. And you should be good to go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, there we go. All right, thank you, Bartek. Thank you, Dover Cole. Thank you, Amy, for doing, I think, a pretty fantastic job at a first draft on this. I know we've been talking about this and working on this project for quite a while. And, when the city went out to try to get a consultant to come up with a concept for what we wanted our city to look like over the next 30, 40, 50 years. I think this is a pretty good draft at how we're going to get there. I do have some specific concerns, and those things I'll send in my my official public comment that I'll email in to you all. But as a general statement, we are looking at preserving the character of the city of Kingston, I think, in a pretty profound way. We are looking at future design and infill development and the entire urban framework of our city in a very holistic way that really takes into account the needs of the community and what it will look like going forward into the future. And I think it's a pretty fantastic job. As with every draft, there's some things that need to be updated and changed, but I think we're quite a ways there, and I'm really looking forward already to the second draft, and I hope we can get our entire community on board. And the next thing we need to do as a community is find people who want to build to these standards and continue to grow our city in an inclusive way that hopefully can eventually alleviate the housing crisis that we're in and continue to bring small incremental development and good infill jobs and commerce and industry here in ways that integrate well with our community and historic nature of our city, and don't do what our existing code does, which is promote parking lots over people. So I think it's a good job so far, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Joshua Unterbach. You should be okay to unmute, Joshua.
Hello, hello. Check 1, 2. Thank you, Bartok, so much for organizing this. Thank you to all of the Common Council members, Dover Cole, and everyone who has participated. I am speaking on behalf of myself and a group of area residents that I work with that cannot attend this evening. As a Kingston resident, I greatly appreciate the time and efforts spent to revise the zoning code. I would like to focus my comment on the intersection of West Chestnut Street and Montrepose Avenue in Ward 9. We feel we are unfairly being excluded from the T3 and transect that our near neighbors enjoy. We ask that the recent and lengthy dialogue pertaining to the specific corner of the city of Kingston be taken into account when discussing elevating the intersection of Montrepose Avenue and West Chestnut Street zoning to T4N, whereas the residents of the area would benefit by being included with their West Chestnut neighbors at T3N transect, which has a much better building to street relationship and is comprised of proud detached homes. There is an ongoing effort to document and preserve the character of this area over the past 2 years. These efforts can be seen in the recent petition to the City of Kingston Common Council to rezone 216 Montrepose Avenue to RT designation by its owner, and the subsequent petition by the City of Kingston Planning Board to encapsulate and reroute the body of water that traverses the parcel. The Common Council denied the rezoning petition, citing vast public comment, which cites increased traffic and congestion that would be associated with higher density development at this physically constrained intersection. The consensus was this area is not ideal for infill development. The planning board denied the petition to encapsulate and reroute the waterway, citing drainage and environmental concerns. I have included a link to the entirety of public comments against the 216 Montrepose upzoning petition in my written comment. Additionally, I have attached the New York State protest petition that my neighbors and I submitted to the Common Council speaking against upzoning 216 Montrepose Avenue to higher density. I'd like to quickly quote Kingston's own Lowell Thing on the topic of setting a precedent for high density infill development, quoted from pages 41 and 42 of the linked public comments. The argument that immediate neighborhood has been compromised by some existing multifamily buildings nearby overlooks the complete story of the neighborhood. Driving through West Chestnut suggests the quiet stability of individual families. The prominently visible exception is the historic school building that in fact is part of the neighborhood story. Rather than intrusive, the adaptation of this building into a 9-unit residence is preserved the building as part of its local history. We strive to retain the historic, quiet stability of single-family homes that Mr. Lowell Thing calls out in his letter. I would also like to request that future meetings on this topic be scheduled to allow the lead agency to attend. The Common Council is in a budget meeting and none of them can attend this evening. I further welcome any dialogue on this topic and can be reached at joshuau@me.com. And again, I want to send a big thanks to Dover Cole for sorting through all of this good, pertinent, and well-intentioned input. Thank you.
Thanks so much. The next speaker is Holly Christiana. And Holly, you should be okay to unmute. Holly, are you there? Okay, we are going to come back to Holly. The next speaker is, and I apologize, I believe it's Stewart. And let's see here. Stewart, you should be okay to unmute, and if you could give your full name as well.
Hey, yep, you pretty much got it right. My name is Stewart Deck, and I also live at the corner of West Chestnut and Montrepose. And I'm going to skip the first part of my comment because Josh covered most of it much better than I did, but basically I want to echo what he was saying, that the flexibility in the term T4N, in my understanding, would allow for higher density, large multiplexes to be built just on this corner within, you can reference the map, but it kind of juts out into the T3N designation that covers the rest of West Chestnut Street. And I think the environmental, social, and historical reasons for why it would be unfortunate were well expressed and documented in the 2020 upzoning, the upzoning events. And and it feels like the T4N designation right now kind of papers over those concerns because of that language that would allow for larger multiplexes to be built on those. Okay, I'll continue with the second part of my comment. Having grown up in the Rhonda, I've seen my neighborhood go from delinquent to debutante, and I understand that there needs to be development. I understand we need housing and density, but I wonder how well our corner at West Chestnut Street and Montrepose could theoretically service those ends without large infrastructural changes, such as increased public transit and restructuring the roads themselves. We're not on any major streets. They could not easily absorb traffic. And for lower income tenants without a car, the closest bus stop is half a mile away at Health Alliance. So it seems like that T4N label really only benefits future developers with a lot of capital, enough to kind of buy us out of our houses and flip them into large complexes, or the vacant lot at 216, which right now would benefit hugely from that because they'd be able to build a larger density structure. Okay, well, thank you for listening to our comments and taking on the extremely sensitive task of planning the future of our city. And I will pass on to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker that I have is Doris Schuler, but I do not see her online. So we will come back to her. The next speaker is Rashida Tyler. Let's see. Okay, Rashida, you should be okay to.
Hi, I actually was just talking to Pastor Schuyler. She was actually at City Hall, and I just sent her the Zoom information. So hopefully she'll be the next. She'll be able to sign up and raise her hand to comment. So I did have some comments on the draft rezoning plan, and in general, from speaking with people in the community.
Hey, Rashida, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second. Do you mind speaking a little bit closer to the microphone?
Oh, sure.
Possible?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay. So basically, I appreciate the work that has went into this plan. I thank you for allowing public comment and the outreach that you have done. So I also appreciate the increased density within the city center, replacing some of what urban renewal has taken from Kingston. And I admire the inclusion of ADUs within the plan as well as the goals to encourage a variety of housing types to support a range of income and affordability levels. I do feel that there are, and I will +1 the concerns around outreach to the Black and Brown community. I also will +1 the person who said a lot of homeowners are not aware of this process. I do believe that a direct mailing would increase participation, as well as more outreach sessions in areas such as the Pankaki neighborhood, as well as Midtown around Franklin Street. I am where I believe the plan could be improved, include the affordable housing standards. Currently, they are set at 10%, which is very low, particularly given how much we have to make up in terms of units, affordable units, given the housing crisis. There are cities like Cambridge, Massachusetts that are actually experimenting with 100% affordable overlay districts, housing overlay districts. That number or percentage of affordability does need to be determined with the community, but it needs to come up from 10%. Another concern I have is in regards to special districts, being that the Kingston Plaza is listed as a special district, and the coincidence of the kind of zoning that favors developments that are already in the pipeline, rather than what the community has said. So I would like again to see more community outreach, and again, developers are part of the community, but those special districts really should not be catered to specific developers. My other comment is going to be around, again, +1 on infrastructure and bonus stories. There is a particular concern around bonus stories in the Pankaki neighborhood. That zoning currently in the draft plan is listed as a T5 flex zone. And that calls for 4 stories with up to 2 additional stories, so up to 6 stories along the waterfront. This is an environmentally sensitive area. It is an area that has a historically Black community. It's been home to families that are working class, and bringing in this type of density not only will disturb the character of the area, but also it's not environmentally sound or sustainable, given the fact that the bulkhead that is currently being considered only protects between around Lower Broadway to the Cornell building.
Rashida, just noting that you're 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. And I do know that the bulkhead the way it's constructed, will actually funnel floodwaters into the Pankaki neighborhood. And there are neighbors there who are very concerned, but have not had an opportunity to interact or to get involved in this process. So I do encourage further outreach and increasing the affordable housing standards within zoning, the plan. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, the next speaker is Holly Christiana. And Holly, are you there now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
All right. So I just want to say very quickly that the outreach really has to be increased. There has to be public meetings available, and I had no idea the third draft was supposed to already be ready by September 1 for approval. Like that time frame is much too crunched for real community input. What I want to reiterate, Bartek, things I talked about at the open house at City Hall and in the recent column I did for the Kingston Times, is that in keeping with the recommendations by the Ulster County Planning Board, non-owner occupied STRs not be allowed. Even with the great modifications in this plan, such as the ADUs and the increased units per parcel, which I am really happy with, Kingston is years away from a healthy housing stock. We knew this in 2020 when that inaccurate survey was done. We are now taking steps to protect local residents that we could have done at that time. We didn't. Now it's mostly a moot point. Town of Olive has enacted a policy where a person is allowed 1 non-owner occupied STR if they can prove it's been operating for a year, and an individual, even as part of an LLC, can only be involved with 2. This is the only way to handle this issue in a way that shows the city cares about those of us who are not wealthy. The City of Kingston School District has hundreds of officially homeless students, and as we all know, many more who are uncounted, sleeping on families' couches or floors. Of course, there are also many homeless adults. Kingston is a place where people live, work, go to school, and raise families. We are not just a vibe where we upstate and chill. Non-owner occupied STRs are a clear and direct insult to those in need of permanent housing that is not wildly overpriced. As a city which rakes in the sales tax and has been the Airbnb leading generator in the entire Hudson Valley for several years running, it is time for leadership to get very real and very serious about who they want to serve. We have lost enough. It has gotten unbearably hard for many of us. I feel that an attempt has been made to dupe us, especially with the continued assertion that the non-owner occupied STRs are only allowed in 3 transects. They are allowed in 2 more by special use permit, and in a court of law, that will always mean allowed. One of those transects does not allow regular homes, and to think that someone with money enough can lounge in our natural areas where we cannot build houses is a special kind of affront. According to Airbnb, Ulster County has 3 times as many hosts as Dutchess and Westchester and 10 times as many as Rockland. They also say that the Hudson Valley is one of the top destinations worldwide. If you put those sentences together, it is obvious that we are not simply welcoming tourists, we are decimating the locals. Let's stop that. If in the future we should find ourselves with a healthy housing stock, a modification can be made to the zoning law, as has been done for the ADUs. Now is not that time, and to even consider it as it is in the current plan is misguided and sends a clear statement as to who Kingston representatives represent. And that's it.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, the next speaker is Julie Ballo. However, I do not see her. I'm going to move to Tanya Garment. Tanya, you should be okay to unmute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. I would like to bring up a few points. One is, well, first of all, I want to say I'm really glad that we're doing a form-based code. The zoning code that we have now was really put together, like the rest of the zoning codes throughout the United States, to support goals that I think so many more people understand are bad goals than they did at that time. The zoning codes that the majority of the United States has support the car industry. They separate peoples. They just make zero sense. And I think that there's a real learning curve in terms of what people are expecting. The idea that one should protect single family neighborhoods is, I don't think people really understand how biased that is. When many of the houses in Kingston were built, they were single family. We had much larger families. And the reason for protecting single family only zoning is really to, what you're doing in essence is you are excluding anybody who can't afford a whole house. And that's simply not fair. And it's not smart, because the people who are in the neighborhoods that have single family only, or that have single family only zoning, they may very well regret it when they come to an age where they have grown attached to their communities and now can't afford or want to keep up a whole house and would like to start sharing their houses with other people, maybe make an apartment and for themselves and rent out the rest to people. So I think that that there's a lot to be understood there. But I do appreciate that there's a lot to think about, and I really am thankful to every single person that makes a comment with this. And we've got a lot of resources up on Engaged Kingston, and I agree that we need to do more outreach than we've been doing. I hope that the Common Council members will start stepping up and holding ward meetings. But I also think it's a great time to start engaging some more community groups. There's some Spanish speaking groups that can be directly consulted. And so I'd like to thank for all the outreach, but also acknowledge that there's a lot more to be done this coming month, hopefully. And also, I am looking forward to if this goes through, the impact on our infrastructure. Sharing resources on a single block, increasing the use of infrastructure on a single block is a lot more economically responsible than doing things like running a road to the business park so that we can sell a few or rent a few buildings out to keep business here. But if you think about, like, that's a good example. It's a huge road where all the pipes are run up a long distance to this sprawl, and we have to stop sprawling. And we've got so many opportunities of various sizes to develop in Kingston. And as it is now, it's only the big guys who end up getting through because they understand that with a lawyer, you can show that our current zoning code is not fair. But somebody who wants to, rent out a room to a friend has an impossible time of getting through. I also just want to quickly say that I hope that more guidelines for the planning board can be put in place for special permits. They need real guidance. Planning board, they're going to need to know exactly what a special use permit should be based on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay, the next speaker is Lee Ryan, and I think I have the right person here. Do I have the right person?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Please go ahead.
I actually have an issue that sort of is about the city in general. I have lived here for quite some time, and I have not been able to get a clear answer from the folks who are doing the zoning code about the preservation, particularly for me, of legacy trees and green space in these parts of the city where development is going to be encouraged. In my experience here, we have lost an enormous number of legacy trees for reasons that are always sort of muddy. I don't really understand the policies that are being used to make these decisions. And I don't see taking out a 100-year-old tree and replacing it with something the size of my wrist as being equivalent in terms of creating green space. So I would appreciate it if the effort that was being made was clearer about how we are handling that particular thing. And if in fact we are going to be setting aside any kind of setback for new developments or any other kind of regulation that speaks specifically to the ability of people to sit on benches in the shade, to be able to, to not try to find the 2 parking spaces that are under a tree in a corner, so that we do have less urban pollution, if I may speak to it in that way, of heat and dust and lack of places for wildlife that is creeping in around the edges when they can. Thank you.
Thanks so much. The next speaker that I have is Sarah Wank, and let me just find you here. Okay, Sarah, it should be okay to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Well, this was fortuitous because I definitely want to echo the sentiments of the previous speaker. I do want to just say briefly that I think there has been an enormous amount of outreach about this process. And if you could have gotten through the last 3 or 4 months in Kingston without knowing this was happening, then you are leading a much more sheltered life than I am. I have a lot of thoughts and issues about this. In general, I'm very happy with the reformation of the zoning code, but I do have a particular interest in street trees and whether this new code can somehow put more power into the city's efforts. Well, all right, let me rephrase that. The city makes very little effort to protect trees right now. It has been a frustration of mine for many years, and I think that if street trees and street design are part of this new zoning, it would be an incredible asset to add some actual muscle to that so that the city has the ability to actually care for trees, plant trees, replace trees. The tree commission is essentially useless. They don't do much to actually care for trees. And we have seen in the last couple of years just the decimation of, as the previous speaker mentioned, legacy trees in our city. And whatever can be codified to make this a responsibility of the city to care for trees would be, I think, a huge improvement over what we have now, which is essentially the no will to do anything when trees are at risk except remove them. So I am very grateful for all the efforts Dover Coal has made. I appreciate the enormous amount of outreach everyone has done. I think, I mean, there are many, many issues, and that's why I'm glad we'll have continuing efforts to speak about this, but I particularly tonight wanted to speak to that. And so I like this little segue, two people in sequence speaking for the trees. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. The next speaker that I have is going to be Emily Hauser. Okay, and Emily, you should be okay to unmute.
Okay, my name is Emily Hauser. I live at 63 Highland Avenue in Kingston. And I'm just checking if you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I am here just to talk about one section, and that is on the renewable energy system. It refers to section 405.21.j. And there's renewable energy system, small scale, and then large scale. And they lump solar energy and wind turbines. And my main comment is that the small scales, they're permitted in everything, okay? But the small scale for solar says that if it is ground or roof mounted, that it will be a footprint of not more than 50% of the primary structure footprint, or 600 square feet, which is greater, whichever is greater. So you could have 600 square feet of solar energy and of solar energy systems. And my comment is why is this a restriction? The restriction should be based on, it's a roof mounted system is very different from a ground mounted. I can see where you wouldn't want a huge amount of ground mounted perhaps, but if a roof is a shed roof facing south, why would you restrict that owner from putting 100% of the structure's footprint, put solar panels on, or if it's aligned in any other way? And so I think that needs to be changed in this time where people are trying to do whatever they can to do renewable energy. This seems very restrictive. And in terms of the large scale is only in T5F and T2 and T1 and in the special districts. And I just would say that it's not really clear to me. It also, it's not really clear to me what this says. But it seems to me that if we're trying to cover a grocery store or some other big box store, or cover a gymnasium, there should be no restriction. And I would, so first of all, I think you should just talk about ground mounted, roof mounted, wind turbine, all kind of separately, not lump them. And then you also have not covered, there is no information on something like heat pumps where there could be wells drilled, and maybe that's not an issue. And
Emily, just noting you're at 3 minutes.
Yep, and I will be submitting written comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Pastor Doris Schuler. If she's, Pastor, if you're in conference room 2, you can go ahead and unmute the computer. If not, we can move on to the next speaker.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm Pastor Doris Schuyler, the Riverview Missionary Baptist Church.
Hey, Doris, I'm going to pause you. If you could just move closer to the computer, please.
How's that? Is that better?
That's a little bit better. Yep.
Okay. I'm representing Riverview
Oh, hey, Pastor, it looks like you're in and out. If you could maybe try and get it as close as possible, we'll see if that helps.
Yeah. All right, is that better?
It's if you could just say one sentence and I can let you know.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, no. I have another solution here. Why don't we move on to the next speaker? If you could come down to the ground floor and I'll come grab you as the next speaker.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Gerald Burke. Okay, and you should be okay to unmute.
I have to say, somehow I'm not able to get my arms around the difference between form-based and use-based. It seems to me that forms-based says, if it makes it look like it fits in the neighborhood, we don't really care what's going on inside. So if it's 2 or 3 things, or you're doing like manufacturing and stuff, if it isn't violating stuff and it looks like the other buildings, you're in like Flynn. I also look to see something like examples where Dover Cole would take pictures of parts of the city that says, here's a part of the city which just naturally is form-based. Here's what a form-based street looks like. And then I would ask as well, how does form-based explain or address the Kingstonian and the Irish Cultural Center? Is that a yes or a no? You can have all these things grandfathered in, but I'd kind of be curious to say, if somebody were coming in post form-based code, would those be permitted uses? Let's see. The other things that are saying like affordable, I don't know what matters. If it looks like the other houses, if you can build it affordably, gangbusters. I also look at the stuff that, in one case, we used to look at use-based or form follows function or something. And based code. I don't know if things simplistic, but the words of form-based versus use-based just tell me that. Has I got anything else here? Yeah, the notion of examples. Here's the street where form-based fits in great, and it already exists. is a case where it's not. For instance, the pajama factory and the shirt factory may not quite fit if you have a lot of single family houses around them. They're grandfathered in. That's the way it's going to look. But I don't think you'd build one like that in a existing, what we'd say, one that's supposed to look like a single family house. Is that what it's supposed to look like? What's the form that we're adopting there? In any case, I still can't get my arms around that. Seems to me form-based, if it looks like it fits, have a blast. Do whatever you want to do in there. No? I don't know. Who answers that?
Okay, we'll answer that as part of in early August when we release the second draft.
Yeah, so let me put one other thing.
And you are at 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, I'm going to move on.
Bartek, your end is muted. Oh. Bartek, your end is muted. We're not hearing anything in the meeting.
Okay, can you hear me? This is
now we can. That's great. Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much. As I said before, my name is Doris Schuyler, and I am the pastor of the Riverview Missionary Baptist Church. And I'm speaking on behalf of Riverview and also the New Central Baptist Church located at 229 East Strand, and Riverview Missionary Baptist Church located at 240 Catherine Street. Both of these buildings sit on the waterfront across from the river, our channel there. And we're coming because we are concerned about the proposed waterfront development that is being considered. You know, it's already a fact that, you know, we deal with flooding during high storms, tropical storms or what have you. We also have issues with the sea level rise in terms of the Strand flooding, and it hasn't even rained. We know that, you know, the plans that have been set in place really do not favor us in any way. To be able to rezone and put heavy buildings on the waterfront, that does not help us in any way. And I don't know if it's been taken into consideration how it's going to affect these two churches, and not just us, but the community at large down there in Pikaki, the families that own homes on that stretch. We're just simply concerned about our property. We're concerned about being flooded out. We're concerned about damage done to our buildings if these things, these structures go up on the waterfront. So, you know, we're opposed to, you know, what is being proposed. And we want to submit our written documentation at a later date, but we do want you to know that this is not going to be an advantage for us at all. And those churches have been down in that community for over 60 years. And there is not just, like I said, the churches, but there are other people who have lived down there for 60 years. If the ones that are living there now, their parents built those houses, or those parents bought those houses, and they're right there in that floodplain. And I just don't understand building such tall buildings or what have you on a floodplain. It's already a floodplain. So we're looking to see what's going to be done. And also we want to look at where the bulkheads are located. You know, the bulkheads are where they're going to stop. You know, are they going to protect the entire community down there on the stretch of the Strand, or are they not? And at this point, I don't believe that the bulkhead is going to come down that far. So we just want to voice our concerns to you, and we look forward to sitting down and talking about this more. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next speaker here, and that is going to be Jennifer O'Donnell. Okay, Jennifer, you should be okay to speak.
Okay, hi. So I want to speak very specifically to the urban agriculture map that was presented recently. I had a chance to look at, I mean, I'm very much in agreement with many of the previous comments related to trees and particularly affordable housing and the short-term rental problem. But just to stick to the urban agriculture issue, having spent working with what has now become the Novo and was the New World Foundation and the Farm Hub, as well as Family of Woodstock and most of the stakeholders in Kingston related to food and security. The report was written with a great deal of input. The reports that I produced on zoning for urban agriculture. And I am finding that the recommendations that are made, particularly for the areas of Midtown, the darker blue and I believe the darker purple sections of the map, where it is most dense, are in fact contrary to the policy recommendations that were made in the urban agriculture report. And those were, just to focus on that, with the idea that there need to be fewer hurdles for people on smaller lots and who are in food deserts and who can produce some kind of informal income or formal income or food production as a result of raising food on very small lots. There needs to be a lower barrier to entry for those folks in particular. And by creating in only those districts a special use permit requirement, you're in fact raising the barrier to entry. There were also many other recommendations, and I will provide written feedback to the consultants and to the city to that effect, which effectively are a couple of hundred pages of reports and appendices that were produced for the urban agriculture zoning in Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Woods. And Lynn, you should be okay to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to second the two speakers. One was Sarah Wink. I didn't get the other person's name. Speaking on behalf of protecting street trees. We've lost some trees on Franklin Street to make way for a new sidewalk. And some of those trees were native species. They were mature and healthy. And the city has a tree inventory that actually advocates for the protection of mature, healthy trees. It says that should be a priority, and it cites some of the reasons why, which are things like shade, so it helps with energy conservation, and also and mental health, and helping mitigate air pollution. And another really important reason to preserve our larger trees is that according to the tree inventory information, they are much better at absorbing carbon. Apparently, it takes 50 years for a tree to start absorbing carbon. So given the fact that we're in a climate emergency, I think there are many reasons why that should be a priority. I don't know how that could be written into the code, but it would be great if the code would give a nod to the tree inventory and our bluestone inventory. These are both documents that the city got grants to do, and they lay out some really important priorities that unfortunately don't seem to have much teeth when it comes to new projects or changes made. So I would just like to say, I think that's really important. And as Sarah Wink said, we've lost a lot of trees. There are parts of Midtown that are treeless. and planting these small trees. I mean, I'm really happy that there are plantings happening, but we should be saving our trees as well as planting new ones. And I also am an advocate of historic preservation, and I would hope that I think the plan mentions bluestone, preserving historic bluestone sidewalks. Again, that's one of those things that we have a bluestone inventory that talks about that, but it seems that it's not always applied when we have projects coming in. So I would like for that to be, to have more teeth if possible. I understand that when changes are made, it's hard to stick to a particular template. There are a lot of variables, but I'm really happy that this code does recognize the historic quality, the traditional quality of the streetscape and the built infrastructure, and would just like that to be hopefully, carried through and made manifest. I think that's all I wanted to say, but I did want to put a word in about that. And also there are a lot of pollinator gardens happening in Midtown. And when these new sidewalks go in, I don't think we can preserve the pollinator garden. So I would really like to see in whatever way we can to help preserve and expand our green infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a previous speaker that I now see, and that is Julie Ballo. So Julie, if you'd like to speak, you can unmute yourself. Julie, are you there? Okay. That was our last registered speaker. I'm going to give it another minute. If you would like to speak, just raise your hand and we'll give it about 30 seconds before we close the hearing. I'm going to try Julie again. Julie, are you there? Again, if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand. Just going to give it a few more seconds. Okay. Amy, I think we can move to the next slide. I just want to say I really appreciate everyone that commented tonight on this very important first draft. And there's a lot more work to do, but really appreciate your engagement on this tonight. If you would like to submit written feedback, please do so by July 1st. And again, everything you need to know about the project is on engagekingston.com/Kingston-forward. And Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything to close.
Yeah, just thank you everyone for taking the time tonight to give feedback. And we look forward to reading all the feedback that we get through July 1st. And we'll be working hard on the next draft to address all the comments. So thank you, everyone who took time to speak tonight.
Okay, thanks.